over the decades, I've gone deeper and deeper and deeper in the rabbit hole. And the deeper you go, the simpler it gets. Because higher up the rabbit hole, everything's moving, organizations, people, networks, and then you go a bit lower. And you move into the wider perspective of it all. What's behind all this manipulation? What's behind, even more, what is this place? Who are we? Where are we? Why are we here? And you keep going deeper. And you come into the non-human element of it all and what have you. But then you hit the point where it all comes out of. And it's real simple. What is driving people is their state of consciousness. And so when you go really deep in the rabbit hole, you realize that, you can talk, and I do, and I have done at great length over the years, about networks of manipulation and satanic groups and secret societies. You do all that. And it needs doing, of course it does, so we know what's going on. But in the end, what's driving the secret society networks that I call the global cult that's behind the dystopian agendas is their state of consciousness. Those who are awakening and seeing it are awakening and seeing it because of their state of consciousness. And people are not seeing it because of their state of consciousness. So what is going on here? So when I started to realize that in the early 90s that this global network existed and what its game was, I started to ask the question, when did it start? And you comfortably go back into the ancient world. You go back into ancient Egypt, into ancient Babylon and Sumer and so on. And you see people coming in and going out, being born and then dying, being born and dying, well, the body dying anyway. They play a part in advancing this agenda and expanding it to its global state now. Then they pass on. And then other people come in, the next generation does it. And I looked at it and I thought there has to be a organizational force that's spanning this period of in, out, individual contributions to advancing this agenda. And then I started to look around the different cultures and the different religions, looking for a common theme for what this force might be. And you start to realize that actually, although they use different names, that they're describing the same force over and over again in all these different areas. So the Christians talk about Satan and the devil and demons. The Gnostics, who were not Christians in that sense, they talked about a negative force called Yaldabaoth and archons, which were the Christian demons. Then you look at the other different cultures, like the jinn of Islamic belief. I was in a taxi being driven by a Muslim taxi driver from New York once, and he asked me, he said, what do you do? I said, well, we start talking. And I started talking about these Gnostic archons and what the Gnostics said they were all about. And he said to me, well, that sounds like the jinn. That's just like the jinn. Yeah. Because you see this theme, the different names throw people, but it's the same theme. And I just got a book out called Perceptions of a Renegade Mind. And the last chapter is called Escaping Wetiko. And it's called that because I then come across the name the Native Americans use, or at least the Cree tribal group use, for this same force, and they call it Wetiko. And basically what all these things are describing, all these different belief systems are describing, is a state of consciousness, a very inverted, chaotic, what we would call evil consciousness. But my definition of evil is the absence of love. Once love's gone, evil remains, but bring in love, evil's gone. And when I looked at how the Cree described Wetiko, it was the archons, it was Yaldabaoth, it was all these things. It's a state of consciousness that's in a very low vibrational frequency state, very chaotic, very inverted. That's why expressions of it, like Satanism and what have you, they use inverted symbols, for instance. Satanists invert the pentagram, they invert the cross. Mm-hmm. Inverting the cross is not to do with Christianity. The cross is an ancient symbol. They just invert everything. It's like the Nazis turned the swastika around to represent the negative force. So this Wetiko is a state of consciousness, which at its most extreme is what brought psychopathy into the world. Psychopaths, they have a list of traits. It's called the Hare test, named after the guy that developed the list. A list of traits which, if you have enough of them, you are officially designated a psychopath. Now, it's psychopaths, super psychopaths actually, that are driving the hoax and are driving the dystopia and the fascism globally. And the major traits of psychopaths is, number one, lack of empathy. the inability to put yourself in the experience of others you're affecting. Empathy is the fail-safe mechanism of human behavior. If you don't have empathy, there are no limits. There's no fail-safe mechanism to kick in. I can't do this to this person because I can empathize with how it must make them feel. No limits. So you're looking at your Bill Gateses, your Klaus Schwabs at the World Economic Forum, you're looking at Anthony Fauci, you're looking at some desperately Wetiko people in Britain who are driving the whole hoax here. And you're looking at Wetiko. They are expressions of this Wetiko. Satanism is expressions of this Wetiko at its most extreme. Lack of compassion is another major trait of psychopaths. And so you hear over and over again, when you're explaining what's going on, you hear, they would never do that. No, you would never do that. They would do it and get off on it. And it's understanding the scale of, well, evil inversion of life that we're dealing with, to grasp actually that they would do that, and they are doing that. But Wetiko is more than that. One of the great traits of psychopaths is they'll lie for as much as necessary to get what they want. There's no shame or embarrassment in lying. You lie. Why do you lie? Because I get what I want. I mean, I worked in the mainstream media for years at the BBC, on newspapers and radio stations back in the 70s and 80s. And it was always corrupt. But you look at this global media coordinated lying on a scale that I don't think we've ever seen before. And so that's a trait of Wetiko. This ability or feeling it's okay to lie by the minute and the hour in terms of the global media, to what? To promote the agendas of the psychopaths, the super Wetiko. And then you come down to the general population. You've got this great number of people who have lost the ability, if they ever had it, to process information into a conclusion. See, what people in control of their own minds do is they take information and they filter it and process it into a conclusion. What great chunks of the population do today is take the information as a conclusion. So when the governments make a statement or the media say this is what's going on, then that is not information to be processed. That is a conclusion to be absorbed. And you'll see this, we see it all the time, where someone will say, I'll tell you what I think's going on. This is my opinion. And what comes out of their mouth is the official story, almost word for word, which they have processed into the illusion of their own opinion and their own conclusion. Now, these are all traits of Wetiko. And how does this work? Wetiko is, this is all part of it. How do we get out of here? Wetiko is a band of frequency. It's a very low, dense band of frequency, which resonates to the frequencies of fear and all the emotional, low vibration emotional states around fear, anxiety, depression, resentment, all these low vibrational emotional states. Every thought and every emotion that we feel and we think goes out as a frequency. You know, fear is a dense, low, slow frequency. When people are in fear and anxiety, they say, oh, I feel so heavy today. Yes, because that's what those low, slow frequencies do to your energetic field. When people feel joy and love, they say, oh, I feel so light today. Yeah, because they're fast frequencies and fast wavelengths. So therefore, they impact upon your field in a completely different way. So the point of Wetiko is to draw human consciousness into low vibrational states so that attachment, that assimilation can take place. And once it does, and the COVID era has, of course, created enormous amounts of fear and trauma with relation to it. I mean, the trauma that this COVID era has created, you know, people just screaming if someone gets too close to them in a supermarket aisle. Wetiko is not going to influence those that it attaches to make them think about questioning anything, about questioning what they're told. That's the last thing it wants. So people simply stop processing information. They become like a software program. They just take downloads from statements and what have you, and it becomes their reality. So awakening people, what's the difference? It's the state of frequency. If your heart is open to any extent, if your mind is open to any extent, then you are operating on a frequency that's beyond the Wetiko frequency. And what we're seeing is this incredibly blatant, it's always been there, but now more blatant than ever, this division between what I would call the Wetiko and those that are awakening to beyond its frequency boundary, its frequency layer. And the perceptions of these two groups is so massively different now, because one is basically channeling Wetiko in terms of its perception, and the other one is processing its perceptions from a much higher level of consciousness. All the way through human history, you've seen this same recurring theme, that there is a force, a negative force, which is trying to manipulate the perceptions of humanity.